It's a third line day. Hello. We're still, of course, in gate 39, the gate of provocation and obstruction. And today we're looking at the third line, which is called responsibility. So what do we know about the third lines? Well, they have this constant process of trial and error, of bumping into things to see what works and what doesn't work. Quite a good gate, quite a good line for gate 39, you might think. So one of the things to know about gate 39 and the way that it works is that gate 39 will tease you. But they're only teasing you to see if you have any restraint. They're not really baiting you. It's a very different energy from that. But they tease you to see whether you'll jump back, whether you'll get angry, whether you'll get aggressive, because they're looking to find the spirit. And you can imagine then what happens to these third lines, because the 39-3 keeps on banging into provocative situations. They just can't help it. This is lower trigram. They're self-involved in that process, and this is a very individual gate. So the responsibility in this third line is in the early recognition of the responsibility of being a mutative force. That responsibility is not simply for the individual. Sometimes the provocation has to be for the benefit of others. These are the people in any kind of a group situation that do the provoking on behalf of others. And they themselves might very well prefer not to get involved, because trial and error, of course, means making mistakes, making new discoveries, and potentially punishment. But because nobody else can or will get involved, they do it because it's built into them. So there's a lifetime learning, and it says the avoidance of confronting obstacles if failure puts others at risk. So this others at risk, this sounds a bit strange because we are dealing with an individual fuel in an individual channel and circuit. Yet built into it is a genetic recognition of the power of mutation to change everything, either positively or negatively. In the exaltation, we have the great benefic, whose first consideration is for the larger framework, the energy to provoke through self-sacrifice. So you might have, what would be an example? Okay, so you have a teacher who is bullying the children in the classroom, provoking them. And then you have one child who is carrying this 39-3 energy, and they will make the sacrifice in order to protect the others. They will go up to that teacher and challenge them. And this child will probably get into trouble. You know, they might have to leave the school. They will probably be punished in some way. But if the child does not make the sacrifice, then others will be at risk. Ra said this is the gate of eating disorders, and there can be a lot of problems with food here. Self-sacrifice can get very messed up. I'm not going to eat, you eat, you eat. I'm going to sacrifice myself so that you can have more. As this is a gate of eating, it's going to be deeply affected by the emotional field. It's an individual gate, remember, so it's melancholic. There is sadness and happiness, and that is also part of the cycle of this gate. People with this line need to be really properly nurtured as they grow up. Otherwise, they can be very insecure, and they can look for the right spirit by getting as disturbed as possible in order to see who can actually deal with them, who will actually love them, even when they are so disturbed. This is absolutely not always the case with every 39-3, but Ra said that there was a tendency and it needed to be watched for. You know, there had to be the recognition of the possibility of that to exist in this line. It's about food, it's about moodiness, comfort eating, discomfort eating. It's individualization, and there is this thread of self-sacrifice running through it. It's a very potent mix. So in the detriment, we find the often disastrous assumption that others are more at risk if an obstacle is not confronted. the energy to provoke through failure, to make sacrifices. So imagine the same classroom situation. The teacher is bullying, and the person with this detriment has the capacity to provoke on behalf of everyone, but they don't. This is an extremely individual activation. The third line is the starting process of seeing that the individual mutation always has to be ready for sacrifice. Always. The moment you have a mutative force in the world, there are forces who want to destroy it. You know, all individuals are freaks. They are all subject to being stoned. And the moment that one is ready to make a mutative provocation for the benefit of others, then it becomes the focus of that field of energy. Sacrifice is built into bringing mutation. There is no mutation in that sense without sacrifice. At the most mundane level in the Maya, where we play, there is always a need for forgiveness within this gate. And it's always there, really, as long as that being is not themselves. The third line should never be seen separate from its harmony with the sixth line. You remember how we've looked at how the sixth line will burn its fingertips in the beginning of its process, going through its third line phase. And it gets to the point of aloofness and potentially wisdom. The third line is always moving towards wisdom. There's a great deal of importance in third line processes if they can really understand that it is not their fault. Ra said that the original subtitle he had for the human design system was A Handbook for No-Fault Living, because this is what it's all about. 39s end up feeling guilty all the time, carrying a burden of guilt because they don't understand their own nature. They don't understand why they upset people. And they don't realize that what they are doing is truly just finding out the difference in a way between the wheat and the chaff, recognizing these forces in their life that are not for them and getting rid of them. Instead of feeling guilty because other people are upset and then again trying to provoke them by becoming a problem within that. When we look at the grounding, we come, of course, to the 38 in line 3, and it's called alliance. So the process of the 39 is to provoke others, to see who has the correct spirit for them, who can be their ally, in a sense. And it always has its trial and its error. That's always an element of how it moves through life, making bonds, breaking them. But there is still a strong potential for alliances to be formed, as the grounding here in gate 38 tells us. So the moon is still in gate 8, and this is the individual throat gate. And then it moves into gate 20 at 1703, the individual gate of contemplation. Again, this is a throat gate, the gate of the direction of the now, or just the gate of the now, you could say, where we find recognition and awareness in the now. It's a recognition and awareness that transforms understanding into right action. It's an existential gate. It's not concerned with past or future, but it's contemplating and being absorbed and awake in this here now. There can be an ability for this to articulate awareness, but it doesn't necessarily have the power to act on it unless it's connected to a motor. And then we move into gate 16, another throat gate, and this time in collective circuitry. And that is at 2:52 tomorrow morning. The logical throat gate of skills, where identification with a chosen skill is necessary in order to master it and bring it to flowering. These are people who are able to undertake a process of constant repetition, and it's a gate that is often associated with the arts. But there is also the possibility of someone without a specific skill becoming a master of their life. And that way you can have talent manifesting as an art for living. or not, of course, that always has to be a possibility too. So this is our 39 line 3. Thank you very much for joining me with this one. I will see you for the 4th line tomorrow. Until then, go gently. Bye-bye.